sun baked the auction yard into a haze of sweat and dust as leather lashes snapped against splintered boards. Inside a rusted cage, a young Apache warrior girl stood silent, eyes aflame with defiance. Her moccasins scuffed the sawdust, wrists scarred by iron rings. Whispers rippled through the crowd. $5 buys blood and bones. On the plank walk, Jeb Whitlock, lonely rancher Barrow's End, lifted his weathered Stetson, chest heavy with old regrets. He met the girl's unbowed gaze and felt a pulse of purpose beat in his ribs. Then he dropped 5 silver coins into the auctioneer's hand. A hush fell, and in that fragile moment, the valley held its breath. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've got something extra special saved just for you. Sun slanted through heat-stroke Gulch's auction pen, turning dust motes into drifting embers. The stock trailer, boards worn thin by freight and rust, rattled as wind crept through gaps. At its center stood a cage built for calves, its bars cold iron. Inside, the girl's shoulders square beneath coarse blankets. Her midnight braids framed a face of ash and fire. No more than 20 summers had brushed her cheek, yet her eyes held the weight of stolen lands. Jeb Whitlock sat on a weather-beaten crate. His spurs clicked once, twice, metal echoes that matched the auctioneer's gavel. A widower since the drought stole his wife for years past. He'd buried his grief beneath miles of sagebrush and cattle hides. Now the hush in the crowd felt like a coil tightening around his heart. The auctioneer, a flaxen-haired fellow named McKee, cleared his throat. Lot 47, one Apache captive. Bidding starts at $5. He spat tobacco onto creosote boards. Murmurs skittered through prospectors and rustlers, curious drifters, and sneering ranch hands. A grizzled cattleman snorted. "5's too rich. She's wild." McKee eyed Jeb. "Any takers?" Jeb glanced at the girl's trembling jaw. No trade goods jingled in his hand. Only 5 silver dollars humbly pressed into his palm by need he scarcely understood. He rose, heart thudding like a desert rattler. "5," he said, voice low and steady. Laughter rippled. A young ranch hand called out, "What's a white man doing by Indian flesh?" Others hooped. Jeb's jaw clenched. He met the girl's gaze, fierce as desert winds. She stood unflinching, chin raised, eyes defiant as drawn bows. McKee counted Jeb's coins, then rapped the gavel. "Sold." The iron door swung open with a creak that sounded like sorrow. Jeb stepped forward as 2 auction hands shoved blankets and shackles from the cage floor. The girl's pulse thundered, wrists free but marked by rust. She limped forward, boots heavy with shame and grit. A hush fell again. Horses stamped beyond the pen. A hawk's cry trailed from canyon rim. Jeb knelt beside her. His coat brushed dust from her skirt. He held out a folded scarf, soft cotton-dyed sunset orange, fringe and hand-sewn lace. "Take this," he said. "It'll keep the chill." His voice cracked like old leather. She hesitated, then touched the scarf's edge. Her fingertips were calloused, finger bones sharp with history. She wrapped it around her shoulders, eyes flicking to Jeb's lined face. No gratitude warmed her gaze, only wary surprise. "Name's Jeb Whitlock," he said, rising. "You're safe with me now." She pressed a palm to her chest. Closed gesture, a vow of self. Then she turned toward the trailer's ramp, cloak swirling, each step a claim of pride. Voices rose in jeers and gossip. Figures heaved by a savage. Lord knows he's lost his mind. Jeb squared his shoulders as the crowd pressed their scorn against the dusty air. He lifted his hat in a half bow. "I've paid my $5, he said. "She rides with me." A rancher in a black vest, George Hadley, Barrow's End cattle baron, stepped forward, face gray as mule dust. "Whitlock, you'll rue that day. She's ours by law." His tone brooked no contest. He fingered a ledger half tucked in his coat. "Trade's final end of the month, unless debts are paid." Jeb's gaze flicked to the town's water trough, where tongueless tongues lapped scandal. He clenched his dust-caked fingers. The law is written by men and bent by pride. I reckon I'll take her to my ranch, make my own terms. Hadley's lip curled. You'll bring trouble. Indian raids, half-breed officers, rotten blood, if you shelter her. He spat. You'll wish you'd let her rot in that cage. Jeb squared his shoulders. I've faced drought and wolves. I can face whispers. He extended a calloused hand to the girl. Come, Aida. The Apache word for a first dance. He'd heard in passing. He'd never dared speak to her people. Her dark eyes widened. She bit her lip, then placed her hand in his. Warm flicker like hope. Behind them, the sheriff tapped his badge, an emblem of Barrows End's fragile peace. He frowned at Hadley, then at Jeb. I'll ride with you out of town. Just keep her out of harm's way. His voice lacked conviction. Jeb nodded, swung open the trailer's ramp. The girl stepped forward, her gaze on the spurred boots of those who'd paid to own her. She kept her head held high. Each breath was defiance. As they left the auction pen, Jeb heard a whispered challenge in the dust. The clatter of boots behind them, the rustle of a ledger's pages turned in haste. A threat unspoken. Barrows End would not grant easy shelter to an Apache child. Their path ahead lay through land painted in prejudice and peril. But as he lifted his mare's reins and headed west, Jeb felt the stir of something he'd thought long dead. Purpose, rising like dawn across scorched plains. A single rifle shot cracked the air, too distant for joy, too deliberate for accident. Jeb halted, mare snorting. He met Aida's eyes, shadowed by fear and resolve. Behind the canyon rim, a rider's silhouette glinted in the sun. The chase had begun. Jeb Whitlock's mare snorted as lead-tipped wind rattled the canyon walls. He pressed Aida low in the saddle's hollar. Every sinew braced for movement. Behind them, the sheriff's escort fell away into dust. A single rifle crack still hummed in Jeb's ears. Somewhere on that ridge, a lone rider spurred after their filmy trail, intent on hauling the girl back to Hadley's ledger. Jeb spurred the mare off the beaten path, ducking beneath wind-scoured juniper boughs. Aida gripped the sunset-orange scarf at her throat, her defiance wrapped in cotton. His own pulse pounded like a drum at wolf song. He'd lost his wife to drought fever and vowed no more losses. Now, with every breath of sage and grit, he swore he'd shield this caged warrior from the same fate. They crept north along a dry wash, hoofprints half buried by shifting dust. Aida's moccasins slipped at the banks. Jeb slid from the saddle to steady her. He saw the memory flicker in her eyes. An Apache camp aflame at dawn, her mother's cries swallowed by gunfire. He offered water in his canteen's cup, and she drank as if tasting hope for the first time. Night pressed in as they emerged onto a ridge overlooking sagebrush flats. A lone structure glowed lantern gold against gloom, a trading post run by silversmith Silas Myers. Jeb guided his mare down the slope. Aida pressed against his side, clutching her scarf's fringe. They reached the wind-whipped boardwalk and dismounted before the saloon's silent doors. Silas Myers, broad-shouldered and graying at the temples, stood beneath a swinging lantern. He had Aida's dark braids and Jeb's spurred boots. "Lost souls?" he asked, voice as gravel-soft as canyon floor. Jeb nodded. "Pages turn on the chase," he said. "We seek water and bread." Inside the post, barrels of salted pork and flour-lined sagging shelves. Silas poured boiled coffee into tin cups and slid a plate of jerky across the counter. Aida tucked into the meat with cautious hunger. Jeb accepted coffee, amber in lamplight, and exhaled the day's burden. A pair of cowhands swaggered in, hats low. One spat tobacco and snarled at Aida. "No sale to redskins," he growled. Jeb set down his coffee. "She's under my protection." The second man laughed. "Protection don't buy you water, Whitlock." Silas stiffened. "Back off, Tom." He drew a wrought-iron pistol from under the counter, a trapper's tool more than a threat. The cowhand's eyes flicked between iron and plank floor. They spat insults, then stalked out. Silas replaced the pistol, voice somber. You're welcome here. But no Hadley's reach runs longer than his cattle drive. Jeb tipped his hat. We owe you. Aida reached for Silas's hand-spun spoon, pressing its bowl to her lips. She brushed her fingers across the scarf's lace, knotting it tighter beneath her chin. Silas eyed the girl. Your name? She met his gaze without fear. Aida. He nodded. Means first to dance. You'll dance again on your own ground. He turned to Jeb. Heard rural whispers. Hadley's cattlemen using Aida's capture to claim your spring rights, arguing her fright drove your herd off. He wants your land, Whitlock. Jeb's jaw clenched. Then he'll know better when we stand our ground. Aida pressed fingers to her fists, strength blooming in granite-veined arms. Outside, wind picked up to rattle the post lanterns. A distant rumble, dust storm on the plain, rolled toward them. Silas grunted. You'll not cross sagebrush into that. He nodded to a narrow corral behind the post, a stable with hay bales and a hitching rail. Shelter in there. I'll watch for Hadley's men. Jeb led Aida to the corral. He tossed alfalfa into their mare's feed bag and draped the scarf over her neck again. Next, he unfastened his own wool duster, wrapping it around Aida's shoulders. She bore his quiet kindness without words, eyes flicking to his lined face. A dust storm scrape filled the corral, grit etching every breath. Jeb blocked the wind at the stable door with his body. Aida propped grain beneath a sloping beam. Each handful was precise, a dance she performed for survival. Jeb settled on a hay bale, memory folding him inward. He saw his wife, Helen, her hair stained by fever sweat, whispering his name as summer sun fell through cabin windows. He'd left her to fetch water. The spring ran dry. He'd come back too late. Aida stepped beside him, holding a chipped tin canteen. He took it, offering water. She drank, brow furrowed in empathy. Jeb felt the ache in her bones, loss, fear, and the burden of belonging to no one. He dug in his coat and produced a scrap of jerky, offering her the first bite. She accepted, eyes steady, trust thrumming in the hush between them. The storm battered wood and sky. Hoofbeats ghosted on the post's roof. Outside, a single whistle rang. Hadley's call to arms. Silas Cox, the trapper, emerged through grit-blurred boards with his Winchester at port. They're coming, he said. Best you ride north at dawn, to the high country where water flows purer. Jeb nodded. He offered Aida his hand. She took it, fingers warm against the scarf. He pulled her close against the storm-slung boards. We'll find a way, he whispered. Her eyes glinted with silent resolve, as if accepting the unspoken vow of protection. Night closed in, shuttering the corral in black. Jeb gathered hay for a fire barrel and struck flint to spark embers. The barrel sputtered to life, orange licking the wind. Aida held the scarf near the glow, its lace dangling like fragile wings. She traced the fringes with practiced fingers, breathing life into each stitch. Reminder of home and a future he'd yet to imagine. Silas crouched beside them, voice low as rattlers hiss. By dawn, Hadley's men will swarm these plains. They'll chase you to the rim. You need shelter beyond the canyon. He spat tobacco onto stone. There's a miner, Hawley, who winters near Clear Creek. He'll hide you for a price. Jeb pressed his jaw. I'll trade in my coat for a night. Silas nodded. Fine, but the storm's end will bring him tracks. Make no mistake. Aida shifted closer, pressing her forehead against Jeb's arm. He felt her breath steady as the fire's pulse. Jeb closed his eyes, memory and grief folding into steel. He drew a slow breath of sage and smoke. Helen once told me to protect the wandering, he muttered, voice raw as canyon stone. Aida's gentle hand pressed his coat. In that moment, loneliness unraveled. The storm stuttered, winds lashing one last gust as if angered by their defiance. Then silence, deep and watchful. Outside, hoof prints skittered on sawdust trails. Silas rose, tucking his rifle under his coat. Rest now. At first light you ride. Aida slipped from his side and knelt, pressing the scarf to her heart. Jeb watched her reflection in the barrel's flicker. No longer the cage girl, but warrior clothed in dawn's promise. He gathered her into his arms, nose brushing her hair. We ride together, he whispered. She closed her eyes, chin resting on his chest. In that embrace, Jeb felt the weight of whispered threats and outlawed scorn fall away. By sunrise, they crossed sagebrush flats and dusty creeks, fleeing the land that feared them. Yet in each other's company, they discovered something new. The quiet hope of family, born from $5 silver and a stranger's mercy. Before dawn's pale light, hoofbeats thudded against the corral boards, more riders than Silas had warned. Lanterns flickered beyond dust-choked slats. Aida stiffened in Jeb's arms. He tightened his hand on the rifle's grip as the door creaked outward, revealing George Hadley's men, Colt barrels gleaming. The world paused, breath held, destiny unscripted. First light painted the canyon rim in pale blue as Jeb Whitlock nudged his mare toward the corral gate. Hoof prints bleached into dusty boards. Hadley's men had circled the post at midnight, their rifles laid on hitching rails like snarling beasts. Jeb lifted Aida from the bale of hay, her sunset-orange scarf unfurling like a banner of defiance. In the dawn chill, her dark braid glinted with frost. "This way," Silas Myers whispered, voice rasped by wind. He led them off the worn trail onto a faint goat path winding into the canyon's shadow. Behind, the trading post vanished into dust and marrow. Ahead lay Clear Creek spindle cottonwoods and the lean-to cabin of Jonas Hawley, miner and silent ally. Aida's boots sank into chill sand. She clutched Jeb's saddle horn, pulse-echoing canyon walls. He glanced at her, memory flickering. His wife Helen's last breath beneath fever's hand, her promise that kindness would endure where loneliness had failed. Today he'd honor that vow. They skirted a rocky ravine where bighorn sheep had fled last blizzard. A harsh wind stung Aida's cheeks. She tightened her scarf. Jeb dug in his saddlebag for jerky and canteens of water. He offered her a strip of salted meat. She accepted without pause, strength in her gaze. Then she pressed the scarf's fringe to his lips, a silent thanks. Halfway down the slope, hoofbeats pounded from above. Jeb kicked his mare forward. Aida vaulted aside into a sheltering alcove. 6 rifles boomed from the canyon's lip, bullets spitting sparks on stone. Jeb leaned low, urging the mare through a narrow cut. Aida followed, boots ringing on sandstone. He felt her hand on his coat, solid as iron. They galloped toward Clear Creek, canyon walls narrowing to a rocky throat. At its mouth stood Jonas Hawley's cabin. Driftwood logs stacked by careless storms, smoke coiling from the chimney like prayer. Jonas waited on the porch, lantern held high. His face was streaked with soot and sorrow, eyes pale as old snow. "Coming quick," he called. Jeb vaulted the rail. Aida slipped through the half-door. Jonas slammed shut the plank, dust boiling behind them. Inside, a single hearth glowed. Venison stew bubbled in a cast-iron pot. The cabin smelled of pine gum and sweat. Jonas poured stew into tin cups, then handed Jeb a wool blanket. "Sit," he said. No pursuit through Clear Creek's riffles, the water and boulders' high tracks. His gaze met Jeb's. "I lost my wife and son in flood. I owed Silas this." He nodded at Aida. "You're safe." Aida crouched beside the hearth, scarf draped over her shoulders. Jeb knelt before her, dipping cloth in hot water to clean dust from her bruise, dark purple blooming beneath the scarf's lace. She flinched, closing her eyes as he worked. A memory pulsed through her. Apache camp at dawn, brothers cry as bullets ripped sky. She swallowed pain, offering Jeb a steady nod. Jonas leaned back, voice low as wind in pines. "Hadley claims your spring diverted buffalo trails. Says he'll dry his stock if you shelter her. He's not a man to barter." He spat. "This cabin's All I have. I'll not see it burn. Outside, the wind rose to howl. Jeb's mare whinnied beyond the door. Hoofbeats thundered on timber. Aida's gaze flicked to window. Jonas snuffed a lantern and lifted his Winchester. Jeb placed a hand on Aida's shoulder. Stay low. Jonas cracked open the door, rifle aimed at shadows. Through swirling dust, the silhouette of Hadley's foreman, Ken Gravel, emerged, barn collar coat, brass spurs flashing. Gravel's grin was lean as a coyote's snarl. He raised his rifle. One last chance, Whitlock. Hand her over, or I drag her out by that scarf. Jonas fired a warning shot at the ground, hammer clicking iron. The ring of steel against stone sounded like verdict. Gravel spat and bolted for cover behind a mesquite trunk. Bullets chipped wood from the cabin's frame. Jeb stepped in front of Aida. Hand on Colt's grip holster, voice steady. You'll not touch her. His mare's whinny stuttered with panic. Aida's eyes were storm-beaten calm. She raised a small knife. One Jonas had lent her, steel glinting like dawn. Gravel froze, brow furrowed. Without hesitation, Aida advanced in the heart's glow, blade leveled. Gravel's rifle wobbed in his grasp. Get back, she whispered, voice cold as canyon granite. Jonas and Jeb exchanged a glance. Pride softening fear. Gravel backed off, eyes flicking to the knife's steady edge. Then he spat. You're a savage. Aida's lips pressed into a line. She shifted her grip, blade catching the lantern's flare before she slipped it back into her sash. Gravel barked a curse, then vanished into dust and shadows, hooting to bring reinforcements. Jeb exhaled, tension draining from his shoulders. Jonas slammed the door shut. They'll circle soon, he warned. You need water beyond the creek's reach, a frozen spring at Dead Man's Gulch. Jonas pointed to a map scratched into the rough plank wall. 2 miles through ice riffles. Aida stood, scarf like a torch against the gloom. She offered Jeb her hand. He took it, and she led them through the cabin's lean alley toward a side door. Trust me, she said, English fractured but sincere. Jeb nodded, memory stirring. Helen's warm hand guiding him through fevered dreams, her faith in him serenading his nights. Now Aida's trust wove new purpose. They mounted in silence, Jonas guiding them along a hidden path. The dust storm had turned to a biting winter gale, flakes swirling at their faces. Jeb wrapped Aida's scarf tighter. She offered him a share of her buffalo robe. He accepted, draping it over his own shoulders. The trail dipped into a narrow gulch where ice clung to boulders like glass tattoos. Each step cracked beneath their horses, frozen breath steaming in the lamplight of Jonas's lantern. Aida scouted ahead, shawl waving a signal. She navigated the wool-slick rocks with sure-footed grace, each hoofprint a silent vow. Halfway down, Jeb's mare slipped on ice, sputtering. Aida leapt from her saddle, steadying the horse's flank with gentle strength. She whispered softly in Apache tongue, a lullaby passed from mother to daughter. The horse calmed, lowering its head. Jeb watched, austere in Grease Hollow. They reached the frozen spring's edge, icicles spiraling from sandstone ledges. Water trickled beneath glass sheathing. Jonas knelt, breaking surface with his flask. He passed it to Jeb, who knelt beside Aida. Her lips brushed the flask rim. She drank deeply. Then Jeb sipped, cold searing his chest with life. Jonas filled a bucket for the Mares. Then we ride to Badger Ridge, he said. Winter's thick there, but you'll find refuge in the abandoned miner's bunkhouse. He led them away from the gulch's roar. As they mounted again, coyote tracks trailed the spring, a warning of wolves. Aida drew Jeb close. They follow, she said, voice low as snowfall. Jeb nodded. Colt at port. We'll face them together. They rode under moon and wind, canyon walls narrowing to a snow-choked knife. Each gust rattled their resolve. Jonas stayed close, steady as mountain oak. Aida's scarf whipped behind her like defiance incarnate. High on the ridge, the skirmish ended in echo, hoarse neighs, and a single rifle's farewell. Below, Gravel's men pause at the spring's rim, faces half hidden by dust and regret. They called out, threats tangled in the storm's roar. Jeb urges mare ahead, voice booming above the wind. We choose our own path. His words scatter across rock, tethering him to promise. Aida raised her knife in salute, blood and memory welded into steel. They crossed the ridge's crest into the storm's howl. Ahead, the miner's bunkhouse crouched in snow drift, dark silhouette against a trembling sky. Aida pressed Jeb's hand, voice sure. Home. But as they neared the door, a thunderous crack split the air, rockslide above the trail. Stones plummeted like furies, smashing the path behind them. In that moment, the world held its breath. Choice and fate tangled in snow and stone, and the only way forward lay through the canyon's defiance. The rockslide's roar still echoed in Jeb Whitlock's blood as he peered through snow-choked timbers at the miner's bunkhouse door. Wind-torn flakes whipped the canyon floor. Each breath was razor against his lungs. Jonas Hawley gripped his rifle, shoulders square beneath a buffalo robe. Aida pressed her scarf's fringe to Jeb's battered cheek, her knife sheathed but ready. Inside the lean-to, floorboards creaked beneath the weight of pressed snow. Jeb forced the door shut. Jonas wedged a plank against its iron strap. The fire sputtered in a half-buried stove, casting sputtering shadows on pelt-strewn walls. Aida dropped into blaze. Embers flared like trapped stars. Jonas swallowed. They'll hammer the door soon. Hadley's jury-rig note said so. Jeb knelt beside Aida, inspecting a gash in her forearm etched by flying shale. He wrapped the sunset orange scarf around her wound, its cotton absorbing warm trickles. Her dark braid tumbled over his weathered hand. In her eyes, he saw defiance tempered by pain. You're strong, he said, voice rough as canyon stone. She nodded, lips pressed tight. Outside, thudding boots rattled boards. A voice snarled, open up, Whitlock. We know she's inside. Kent Gravel's baritone carried like a mallet's blow. Jeb rose, Colt heavy at his hip. They'll not take her, he muttered, recalling Helen's last plea to shelter the helpless. He slid a Winchester's hammerback. Jonas matched him, breath poised. Aida slipped beside Jeb, steel glinting. She traced a notch in the scarf's lace, each mark a canyon mile conquered. Then she knelt before the trap door, leading to the bunkhouse's root cellar. If they break in, she whispered, I'll lead us out to the creek tunnel. Her voice was blade-sharp courage. Jeb's chest stung with pride and fear. They braced as the door splintered under blows. Jeb holstered the Colt, drawing flint from his coat. Sparks caught tinder. A flare arced across dim light. Jonas fired a warning volley. Steel snapped against rock. Hadley's men cursed. Jeb pulled Aida into the flicker. This way, he hissed, pointing downward. The cellar hatch groaned as Jonas yanked it open. They slipped into damp darkness, boots echoing in bone-cold stone. The root cellar smelled of earth and decay, reminder that life clings where death once ruled. Aida lit a lantern. Its glow nudged shadows aside. Roots dripped, water pooled at ankles. Jeb stepped over a wooden crate and knelt beside Jonas. Jonas's voice was a whip's crack. I'll hold him here. He placed a coil of rope across his shoulder. Follow the tunnel to the spring drain. You'll find open ridge above. Jeb gripped Jonas's arm. I won't leave you. He drew a blade. Jonas's lip twitched in a sad smile. You must. My mind claims me. Aida's hand closed on Jeb's. We go, she said, voice hushed steel. She laid a gentle hand on Jonas's shoulder. Jonas closed his eyes, remembering his wife and child lost to a spring flood here, memories that steered him to mercy. He patted each of them. Go now. Jeb lifted Aida into his arms. She pressed the scarf's edge against his cheek, wordless thanks. He kissed her brow, then dropped through the hatch as Jonas slammed it shut. The tunnel slope led them through frozen rock, each step a prayer. Behind, muffled rifle cracks echoed, Jonas's sacrifice ignited by loyalty. They emerged at Dead Man Spring's outlet, ice-crusted rocks overbearing. Water seeped from beneath stone, trickling along a narrow channel cut by milky drips. Above, snow-choked light beckoned. Jeb set Aida on her feet, checking her knife's grip. She nodded, eyes bright in lantern's halo. The ridge loomed ahead. Wind-scoured pines balanced on frost-lined ledges. Jeb scouted a goat path sloping upward. Aida's small form darted ahead, scarf whipping like a banner of hope. Each hoof print was a promise. Jeb followed, heart a tangle of fear and resolve. Hadley's men circled the gulch below, voices distant thunder. Jeb paused at a ledge where granite jutted into sky. He glanced at Aida, trembling but unbowed. She raised her knife in salute, blade catching frost. In that moment, she was no captive, but a warrior forging her path. They climbed through snow-fanged thickets to the bunkhouse's trapdoor above. Jeb pried it open. The storm's gale welcomed them. The cabin's lantern glimmered in a drift, a single signal. Jeb stepped inside, saw Jonas leaning against the wall, blood darkening his collar. Gravel's men swarmed the porch beyond their fall. Jeb dropped beside Jonas, pressing a hand to the wound in his side. Jonas's breath was shallow. Too late to run, he rasped. He passed Jeb a folded note. Hadley scrawled a demand for Aida's return, or the spring's deed would be voided by law. Jeb crushed it in one fist. Not happening. Gravel's voice rasped through rotted boards. Come out, Whitlock, or we set fire. Flames licked bunkhouse rafters. Sparks drifted through chinks. Aida stepped forward. She lifted her scarf and tied it to the rifle barrel, letting the orange cloth unfurl outside as a flag of challenge. Jeb met her gaze. Fear and pride tangled. He drew his coat iron cold. We stand here, he whispered. Jonas's eyes softened, death bright. He nodded. Then Jeb and Aida kicked open the door, rifles leveled at Gravel's man. Snow and firelight painted them in raw contrast, ghosts of frontier justice. Gravel spat. You'll regret this. He lifted his rifle. Jeb's finger hovered on the trigger. Aida raised her knife. Then Jonas, weakening, lurched forward. He knocked Gravel's rifle aside, catching him off balance. The colt barked. Gravel staggered, clutching his shoulder. Hadley's men faltered. A single shot rang, then silence. Gravel hissed, eyes blazing hate and fear. He spat blood and turned, mounting his horse. His men followed, spitting curses, spurs carving arcs in snow. Jeb watched them go, chest heaving. Aida knelt beside Jonas, pressing a cloth to his side. Jonas's hand clasped hers, feeble but fierce. Thank you, he whispered, voice lost in collapse. Aida's tears glowed in lamplight. Jeb knelt beside her, grief biting at his ribs. Jonas smiled through pain. Take care of her like Helen taught you. His gaze flicked to Jeb's scarred cheek. Helen's final kindness to protect the lost. Aida bowed her head, scarf drooping as if mourning. Jonas exhaled, lifeblood slipping through frozen pulse. Jeb closed his eyes, pressing his palm to Jonas's chest. You kept your vow, he murmured, voice tight. We won't forget. Outside, wind defied the world's stillness, rattling boards. Aida rose, wiping tears on her scarf's fringe. She faced Jeb, voice a tremor of steel. We finished this for him. Jeb nodded, coat holstered. He unwrapped the scarf's lace, draping it around Jonas's cold form as a final benediction. Snow drifted at the doorway. Jeb and Aida stepped out together, shoulders squared against the storm's howl. The ridge beckoned, Badger Ridge's barren crest, and beyond, the wide plains of Barrow's End. Hadley's menace had driven Jonas to sacrifice. Now Jeb and Aida must finish the stand he began. A final whistle echoed from below. Kent Gravel's vow carried by wind. Jeb's gaze hardened. Aida's knife gleamed like sunrise in that frozen canyon. Among ghost fires and broken vows, they claimed their path. Two souls bound by mercy, defiance, and a silent promise to forge freedom from control. Ahead, the ridge's narrow pass curved into darkness. Beyond its lip lay Hadley's domain, and the truth of justice awaited them. The wind whispered, "Choose your next step." Jeb lifted Aida's hand. She nodded, scarf snapping like hope. Together, they rode into the storm's edge, uncertain, unbowed, and not yet free. Snow-laden pines bowed beneath dawn's pale light as Jeb Whitlock and Aida crested Badger Ridge. Jeb's ribs burned, rockslide shard had cut him deep, and each breath tasted of iron and pine. Behind them, Kent Gravel's rifle barked in the pass, but the hollow walls swallowed shots. Jeb urged his mare forward, teeth clenched against pain. Aida rode close, scarf trailing orange flame against white. They spurred downhill to the sheriff's cabin perched at the ridge's mouth. Deputy McAllister, stubble on his jaw, swung the door wide. "You made it," he gasped, netting Aida's horse. Jeb slid from the saddle, pressing a hand to his side. Blood darkened his coat. Aida dismounted and knelt, pressing a cloth to his wound. Her fingers, steady as stone, bound torn flesh. Each tuck of cloth echoed her Apache care rituals. Water drawn from the spring, herb poultices Jonas taught her to gather. McAllister ushered them inside. Lanterns glowed on rough planks. A ledger lay on the desk. Beside it, Jonas's Winchester and the wrinkled note he'd left. "Whitlock holds to honor, not Hadley's greed." The deputy read the note, eyes misting. "Jonas gave his life for you," he whispered. Aida bowed her head. Jeb grabbed her hand, voice raw. "He saved us." McAllister drew Hadley's writ from the ledger, a demand for Aida's return or forfeiture of Jeb's water rights. His spurred boots thundered beyond the porch. George Hadley himself strode in, long overcoat sweeping powder. His voice crackled like a whip. "Deputy, enforce the law. Whitlock Spring belongs to me, by rights of complaint." Jeb rose unsteadily, colt in hand. "This spring feeds my ranch. Jonas's note, and your writ can't drown its truth." Hadley's cane tapped the floor, each knock a verdict. "I'll see your claim dry." The deputy stepped between them. "Not on my watch." He slapped his badge. No forcible seizure. Hadley's lip curled. He produced a letter scrawled by a distant judge. Hadley's brother-in-law, threatening to revoke Whitlock's deed if Aida remained. "Legal," Hadley snarled. Aida slipped her knife from her sash, blade ice with frost. She held it out. 2 inches of self-possession. Hadley froze, gaze flicking to the blade. Jeb dropped his coat and raised his hand. "She's under my name, my kin. No law binds her to Hadley's ledger." He stepped forward, wound pressing. Pain carved furrows in his face. He sank to one knee, voice brittle. "I give her my spring, my land, everything I own." He drew out a battered deed, hand shaking. Aida gasped as Jeb pressed his thumbprint into the grease-dark ink. Hadley's jaw slackened. Aida reached forward, pressing Jeb's hand. Then she drew the deed gently, turning it between her fingers like talisman. The sheriff took the deed, stamping it transferred. McAllister rose, voice steady. "By law, she owns Whitlock's ranch. You'll remove your claim or face contempt." Hadley's face darkened. He spat on the floor. "This isn't over." He turned and stalked out, boots clinking on snow. Deputy McAllister nodded. "He'll grumble, but the spring's hers now." Jeb exhaled, feverish tremor coiling into relief. Aida knelt beside him, scarf's fringe brushing his cheek. "You gave me freedom," she whispered. He met her gaze, eyes wet. "You gave me reason." Later, they rode into Barrow's End under midday sun. Townsfolk paused in sawdust and saloon doors to watch Aida, legal rancher, ride alongside Jeb's mare. The sunset orange scarf streamed behind her like a new flag. Even Hadley's cattlemen lowered their hats in silent respect. At Whitlock Ranch, fences gleamed fresh under cloudless sky. Jeb and Aida dismounted before the corrals. Neighbors gathered. Mrs. Corrigan, the widow who sold Jeb flour, Old Tom Ryder, trapper and friend Jonas. Each pressed forward, hand extended, nods of pride. Aida offered Mrs. Corrigan a carved wooden horse, a gift of friendship. Corrigan's eyes glistened. Welcome home. Jeb led Aida into the cabin, where Jonas's photo rested on the mantel. He took Aida's hand and guided her before the hearth. Flames danced on the deed, now framed between two buffalo hides. He drew a match from his pocket, flicked a spark to the scarf. The orange cloth curled in flame, smoke drifting like prayer through rafters. Aida watched, tears bright. Jeb laid the scarf's last ashen to her palm. Memories, not chains. Outside, the wind whispered through sagebrush, promise of seasons turning. Jeb rose and lifted Aida into his arms. She rested against his chest, her pulse steady as dawn. They gazed across the ranch's wide expanse. Grazing cattle, wind-swept fences, the spring bubbling like new beginnings. As sun dipped behind the distant rim, neighbor and deputy gathered at the porch. Mrs. Corrigan brought a pie. Tom Ryder brought a fresh buffalo robe. McAllister tipped his hat. A fine family you make. Jeb and Aida exchanged a quiet glance, shared promise and silent love. No words were needed. Under twilight's hush, they stood on their land. No cage, no auction pen, only two souls bound by compassion and defiance, guardians of each other's freedom. Their footprints led into the amber dusk, and the ranch's gates swung wide at last.